Once upon a time, 3 little engines lived in their own little shed on their own little railway. Duke was brown, Falcon blue, and Stuart green. Duke was the oldest. He had been the first engine on the line and named after the Duke of Sodor. He was proud of this and wanted everything just so. Whenever the others did anything they shouldn't, he would say, "Other engines came and went, but Duke outlasted them all." Stuart and Falcon used to call him Grandpuff. Duke was fond of them and tried to keep them in order. They were fond of him too, as he was so wise and kind, but they did get tired of hearing about his grace. Sometimes they would wink at each other and chant solemnly. Duke would say indignantly, said Duke, "Stuart and Falcon were unusually good for several days. They became useful engines, and all 3 were happy together for many years. But hard times came. The mines closed one by one, and the engines had little to do. At last their line was closed, and people came to buy the engines. They said, but no one wanted Duke. They thought him too old. Called Stuart as they went away. They all laughed bravely, but not one of them thought it would ever come true. Duke's driver and fireman oiled and greased him. They sheeted him snugly and said goodbye. They had to go away and find work. Duke was alone, locked up in his shed. He wondered. But his Grace had been killed in the war, and the new Duke, a boy, hadn't heard of his little engine, said Duke to himself. Years passed. Winter torrents washed soil from the hills over the shed. Trees and bushes grew around. You wouldn't have known a shed was there, let alone a little engine asleep inside. Have you guessed about Stuart and Falcon? Yes, you're quite right. They came to the Finn Controller's Railway. He gave them new coats and new names. Stuart became Peter Sam and Falcon Sir Handel. They prefer their new names. That was a long time ago, but they never forgot Grandpuff, and often talked about him when alone. They were excited to hear that Duke was coming to Skarloey's and Renea's 100th birthday, but most disappointed with the Duke who actually came, for he was only a man. But we must say no more, or we will spoil the next story. Ever since Skarloey and Renea's had their 100th birthday, Peter Sam had been worried. He kept on saying that the real Duke never came, said Duncan. Peter Sam persisted, said Sir Handel. Skarloey put in quietly. Here is one of the stories that Peter Sam and Sir Handel told about Grandpuff. It happened when Sir Handel was new to the line. Now have you remembered that in those days he was called Falcon and painted blue? You have? Now we can begin. The manager came to see him one day and said he was pleased with his work so far. He went on, said Falcon, excited. Falcon didn't like this. He thought Duke was a fusspot and a regular old fuddy-duddy. Duke's train was one for holiday makers. He called it the picnic. Falcon was ready when Duke arrived. Duke drew forward beside him. He said Falcon, said Duke shortly. He puffed again on starting. Puffed Falcon on starting. They rattled through the first tunnel, looped round, recrossed the river and entered the second, climbing all the time. Their speed grew slower and slower, urged Falcon. Puffed Duke stolidly. The tunnel was curved and pitch dark. Falcon felt stifled. He wanted to get out. Presently the light grew. 2 ribbons of track appeared ahead in the gloom. Warned Duke. Scoffed Falcon. The tunnel mouth grew larger and larger, till at last they burst into the sunshine. The line here swung sharply right. It was laid on a ledge cut in the hillside. Below lay the valley where they had come. Track and buildings looked tiny, like toys. No one quite knows what happened next. Duke said there must have been something on the track, and Falcon hadn't kept a good lookout. Falcon said he was dazzled, so how could he keep a good lookout? Anyway, their coaches had barely cleared the tunnel when Falcon lurched. His front wheels derailed, crunched over the sleepers and ballast. He came to a rest with one wheel uncomfortably near the edge. Duke had saved Falcon. Now he held on grimly with locked wheels and taut couplings. He hissed. Falcon tried hard to stop shuddering. Quickly, Duke's driving fireman chocked his wheels and strengthened the coupling between the two engines. Said Duke. With Duke secure, the two crews, helped by a plate layer, propped up Falcon's front end. They were looking forward to a rest when Duke began wheezing in an alarming way. His fireman ran to the cab. He cried. The plate layer's cottage stood nearby. He explained to his wife, and the passengers borrowed jugs, buckets, kettles, saucepans, and anything, in fact, which would hold water. They formed a chain from the well to the engine, and passed them from hand to hand. The fireman, meanwhile, reduced his fire, and anxiously watched the gauge. It was hot and tiring work, for Duke needed many gallons, but at last the fireman shouted cheerfully, and they all set to work again with a will. They cheered again when the breakdown gang arrived. They showed other passengers how to help them lever Falcon back to the rails. The manager was at the top station. He said he was sorry about the accident and thanked the passengers for their help. They thanked Duke and his crew for preventing a nasty accident. They said, Falcon said, replied Duke. Duke's picnic was a train for summer visitors. It was his special train. Many people came year after year just to see him. He always pulled it, even if he felt poorly. He would say, the morning run gave no trouble. He took his passengers up the line and stopped anywhere they wanted. He and his driver knew all the best places for picnics. He whistled as they waved goodbye. One day, Duke felt poorly at the end of his first picnic journey. He had been short of steam and was glad of a rest before starting back. His driver and fireman had just finished cleaning his tubes when Stuart bustled in. Said Duke. He puffed away, whooshing crossly from his draincocks. Duke couldn't stay cross for long. It was a lovely evening. All the picnic parties were ready, the coaches ran well, and they lost no time anywhere. He chunted happily. They began the climb. The work was harder, but Duke didn't mind. He panted. He needed more than that though. His puffs changed to wheezes. But the leaks became worse, and soon he was whooshing hoarsely with escaping steam. Duke's driver examined him carefully at the next station while the guard went to the telephone. Anxious passengers gathered around. The guard reported. Falcon buffered up in front. He whooshed importantly. Whistled Stuart cheekily. He was coupled on behind. Whistled Falcon. Replied Stuart, and away they went. Falcon had left his train at the middle station. Arrived there, the cavalcade split up. Falcon went down to the port with Duke's picnic, while Stuart headed Falcon's train with Duke coupled behind. Stuart was excited. He chortled gleefully. He fought. He puffed kindly. Duke was by no means crippled. His vowels sounded worse than they were. He could have kept his train, but his driver said. Duke agreed. He didn't want to spoil their day. He listened to Stuart chortling and smiled. He and his driver had their own joke ready. At first they used just enough steam to keep moving, but the last half mile was uphill. Said his driver. He advanced the regulator, and Duke responded with a will. He puffed and roared as though the whole train's weight was on his buffers. People heard the noise from far away. They ran to see what was happening. At the workstation, Duke uncoupled and went along the loop to the water tank. "A boy on the platform asked," said his father. Exclaimed Stuart. He vanished in a cloud of steam. Duke wheezed alongside. He chuckled. Duke's story soon spread. The engines told Mr. Hugh. Mr. Hugh told the Fin Controller. The Fin Controller told the owner told His Grace told the Small Controller told the Fin Clergyman, and the Fin Clergyman told the Fat One. That is why one morning the two clergymen and the Small Controller were looking at maps. Said the Small Controller. Said the Fin Clergyman. He smiled at their downcast faces. He went on. So the clergyman told them about Duke, Falcon and Stuart. He continued. The three small engines sighed sympathetically. The three small engines promised to be good as gold. The three men spent days and days at the old station. They came up every morning on one of the engine's trains. He always whistled as they walked up the track, but they had nothing in the evening except scratches and torn clothes. They wouldn't give up though, they said. The fat clergyman found him in the end. Scrambling over a hillock, he trod on something which wasn't there, crashed through a hole and landed, legs astride, on Duke's saddle tank. He shouted. The Fin Clergyman and the Small Controller peeped through the hole above. Inquired Duke. The fat clergyman ruefully felt his bruises. He laughed, and he told Duke about Falcon and Stuart. Said Duke softly. So they set to work, and by the time the Small Controller had fetched His Grace, Duke was the cleanest of anyone in the shed. Early next morning, Mike brought workmen and tools. They enlarged the fat clergyman's hole, lifted Duke out, and put him on a low loader to take him away by road. Duke protested. Said His Grace. Duke gave in then, but so many people came out and greeted him that he felt better. He thought happily. Donald was waiting with a flat truck. Everyone cheered when Duke was lifted onto it, and still more when he started along the big railway on the last stage of his journey to his new home. Peter, Sam and Sir Handel were on early turn. They peeped out to the shed. They whispered. Duke opened his eyes. He grumbled. Said Duke. The pair chuffed away, well content. Murmured Duke. But his old eyes twinkled, and for the first time in years he smiled as he dozed in the sun.